Hello, welcome to Settling for Catan all.
Yay!
This is a panel where I will talk about board games. Since there's so few of us, I'm going to be as informal as possible. So the general theme I have going here with most of my panels is we have to make things great again, so we're going to have to make board games great again. Though, when you think about it, board games are actually pretty great now, and that hadn't been the case 20, 30, 40 X years ago. So we need to really update this theme for the 2020 election, so we're going to keep board games great. So first I'm going to go over kind of like a history of board games. As you notice, most board games that have been made are made now. Most of the stuff you've played is old. Battleship is from 1931, Sorry's from 1933, Monopoly's also from 33, Candyland 49, Scrabble 52, Risk 59. So most of the games that you played as a kid are the same games your parents played as a kid, which means you haven't really expanded your horizons. What you play is that. But what you should be playing is over up in like the, oh, cool, I can do this, these games. And in fact, we get more expansions for games released now than we got new games, period, through previous decades, being the expansions being red versus, over here in the 70s, and new games being blue. So let's start talking about how bad your childhood was. First, we have Monopoly. Monopoly is a game for 2 to 8 players. It advertises itself as taking 1 to 3 hours, but we all know that's a lie. This is, of course, helped by the fact that no one knows how to play Monopoly because reading rules is for losers. Examples, you have free parking, which doesn't exist. People play with no rent collection in jail, which isn't a rule, though it should be and is in real life. And when you land on a property and you don't buy it, you have to auction it, but no one does that either. So basically, no one knows how to play this game, which is sad given everybody owns at least 3 copies. Its Board Game Geek ranking is 15,810, which may not sound too bad until you realize the lowest ranked game is 15,818. Its core mechanics, I have to move this. So its core mechanics, we have roll and move. When it comes down to it, all you can really do in Monopoly is roll dice and then move. That's the extent of your autonomy. All you have control over is how you roll the dice, which really isn't control. Set collection, you have to collect sets. Set collection isn't inherently a bad mechanic in a game. A lot of games have done it well. It's Kaido, for instance. But in Monopoly, your ability to collect a set is entirely randomized, which takes away most of the strategic input you have. And the final mechanic we have is player elimination. Good games generally don't eliminate players. If you were to, but do it again, I know what I'm talking about. Good games generally don't eliminate players. There are some exceptions, of course, and in late stages of games, if there's player elimination, that's fine, but Monopoly is not a good game. The one bright side of player elimination in Monopoly is, of course, that once you've been eliminated, you can do something much more fun, like browse Reddit. So continuing Monopoly, the only people who ever want to play it are people out of social obligation. Anyone who's playing it because they actually want to have fun is lying to you. It's got a lot of table flipping in it, so much like Gandhi in Civilization, this game can end very abruptly. Its Board Game Geek ranking is still way too high. It's beating out Tic-Tac-Toe, but honestly, we need to work on that. Thematically, it doesn't make sense, because in this game, you're a beggar tycoon, but you want to be a tycoon. But instead, you go and just pay to stay at someone's hotel when you have a perfectly fine hotel down the street that you could stay at. So why are you paying rent? You're clearly a failed businessman who's on the verge of bankruptcy all the time. You play with yourself a lot in this game, which really isn't as fun as it sounds because there's very little player interaction. The extent you get is when you trade with someone, which you never want to do because if you're trading someone in Monopoly, you are giving them the game. And you shouldn't do that. So once you can take the game into your own hands, you're going to mess it up. The final theme we've got going here is familial disownment, which is fine because Uncle Rick was really racist and you didn't want to talk to him again anyway. So a lot of people propose other games to play instead of Monopoly, a common one being Catan. Those people are wrong. Catan is also bad. So Catan's a game for 2 to 6 players, takes 1 to 2 hours. Its Board Game Geek ranking is 289, primarily because people have bad taste. So its core mechanics are trading. You can trade resources. This is actually fine. While I don't like Catan, I'm willing to acknowledge it has some things going for it, and that it's primarily trading and having ports to allow you to trade with not people when you don't want to let them win. Next mechanic you have is network building. Network building is another fine mechanic. It's where you connect cities and branch out on a map. The problem, of course, with Catan is network building can allow you to block players out very early in the game, causing someone to be deemed irrelevant on round 2 and be stuck playing for an hour without having any input in who actually wins the game. So it can kind of just ruin the whole experience for someone. Finally, it has hand management, where you have a hand of cards and you manage it. They don't really do anything with that, so it's wasted. Problems with Catan include that it is generally a geek's game, in that once you start playing Catan, you are now a geek, which is really annoying. It's like someone has only watched Bleach and now says they're a big fan of anime. They're not. They're a fan of bad shows. So this is basically the Bleach of board games is what I'm saying. Unlike the beverage, which is delicious and nutritious. So core mechanics, let's go over a couple more. Catan is really a glorified roll and move. You roll dice and get resources based off that, and that means your entire strategy is based on rolling dice. So if you don't roll any 4s, sucks to be you, you're not going to have any fun. There's really not as much player interactivity as you'd expect in a good game. There's more than, say, Monopoly, but your interactivity is being able to trade with people and sabotage them. And that's kind of it. Trading isn't a lot as far as it goes. You can block people out. That's generally used to destroy someone's life. And the final thing you have is the thief. One of the big problems with Catan is it suffers from runaway leader syndrome. You have a pretty good idea of who's going to win a couple turns in. And then from there, it's kind of a competition between just until that one person hits 10 points or one of those 2 people hit 10 points. And the only mechanic implemented in this game to sabotage it is the thief. And the problem is when it comes down to it, the thief is an area denial mechanic. So it generally doesn't just block out the leader. When used properly, it's going to end up blocking out other players as well, potentially even yourself. So it doesn't really give you much of a catch-up mechanic or a way to really specifically target players. Finally, it's overrated. That's obvious. It was probably like on an episode of Big Bang Theory, and that's why everyone likes it. Addendum, don't watch Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory is even worse than Bleach. So what should you play instead of Catan and Monopoly? I recommend Power Grid. In Power Grid, you play an electrical municipality, and you are trying to connect a power grid across the country by buying power plants and powering them. It's a lot of power. While the theme is kind of dry, it's a lot of fun, I swear. So it's a game for about 2 to 6 players. It takes 2 hours, and they mean it. This isn't a lie. Its Board Game Geek ranking is 32. When I made this panel, its ranking was like 19, which just goes to show how quickly good board games come out. So I'm going to kind of walk through how Power Grid works by going over its core mechanics. So Power Grid, one of the main mechanics in Power Grid is an auction system. In this game, how that works is you will have power plants for sale, and everybody's going to take turns auctioning on the power plants. You need power plants to power cities to give you money so you can buy more power plants. So you're going to be bidding on these power plants with other people. Each plant uses different resources. So you might go, oh, I want this oil plant, or I want this coal plant, or I want this uranium plant, and then someone's going to fight you for it. And then you have to sit there and wait a minute and calculate how much money you have, how much you can afford to spend on the plant, and it becomes this really like bureaucratic, cutthroat game where you might just be bidding on something to make someone pay more so they can't afford things later. Power Grid also has network building. It's implemented much better than Catan. In Catan, you build a road and you cut people off. In Power Grid, you have to connect cities through pipelines. However, unlike Catan, where once a road is placed somewhere, it's cut off, in Power Grid, as the game progresses, more networks open up, meaning if you've been cut off early game, once the game hits a later stage, you're able to expand outward. And generally, as a player, if you've been cut off by a lot of people, that increase in plants is going to give you that increase in connections is going to give you a leg up on other people who blocked you off, because suddenly you're able to encroach in their territory much more effectively than they can into yours or each other's. The final main mechanic with Power Grid is resource management. You have to manage resources, not only your own, but a shared resource pool. Each power plant uses different resources, which means you might have a uranium plant and you need to buy uranium, or a coal plant and you need to buy coal. However, everybody's buying resources from the same market, and the cost of those resources goes up the more in demand they are. So not only do you have to manage your money for how much coal you can afford, but you might have to start managing how much coal you need in general to either get out of the coal market entirely or buy it up so other people have to transition out of the market. Which keeps this really cutthroat mechanic where you're constantly switching out power plants to change with the market, because suddenly uranium's cheap because no one's been buying it, so you're going to get in on that, and then maybe everyone gets in on it and it becomes very expensive. My final suggested alternative game for Monopoly is, of course, Living in Crippling Poverty. It's a lot of fun. I recommend it. It's for 1 or more players. It takes about 68.5 years. Its board game geek ranking is 1 penny, which I'm not sure is good or bad. Unlike Monopoly, it is thematically consistent. You are not trying to be both a beggar and a tycoon. You are just a beggar. The best part, of course, is you don't have to pay rent. You have variable player powers. Character creation, you can choose things like having a dog or being able to play the harmonica. There's commodity speculation, primarily how moldy is the bread you found in the dumpster. And there's set collection. Can I finally build a working cigarette out of all these butts I found on the ground? And unlike Monopoly, after a game of Living in Crippling Poverty, your family might still talk to you. So let's go for the next game that everybody loves and shouldn't, and that is Risk. Risk claims it's for 2 to 6 players, but if you've played a 2-player game of Risk, don't. It's terrible. Even if you and your brother are really bored and it's raining outside and your parents won't buy you video games, there are much better alternatives than playing a 2-player game of Risk, like yelling really loud until you're grounded. It says it takes 2 hours, but we all know that's a lie. Its board game geek ranking is 13,252, so while it's considered better than Monopoly, that's not really saying much. Its core mechanics, you roll a lot of dice, and that's how you do everything. You roll dice to attack, you roll dice to defend, and cool. And it's really heartbreaking when you have an army of 20 guys, and you try to invade someone, and they have 2, and they beat you because you keep rolling 1s, and then you cry and flip the table. It's got area control. You control territories. Your resources are determined by how many territories you control. So more territories equals more resources, equals more ability to gain more territories, and it kind of snowballs. And finally, player elimination. But as we went over, player elimination is not a bad mechanic when the game is bad. So once you're eliminated from Risk, you can browse Reddit. Though you can also do that for most of the game of Risk, since turns take forever. So who plays Risk? People who really want to dominate the world but are never going to be in any situation where they can, and are also not smart enough to do so in games like Europa 4. Other mechanics it has going for it is turtling. Risk is generally a very static game state where you have small skirmishes trading small bits of territory. That's kind of all that happens, is you take a country to get a card and hope that the cards will later on help you. Which leads to the next core mechanic, grand armies from nowhere. Congratulations, you have a lot of cards. Cash them in for a lot of dudes. Use that to cause a huge disruption in the game state, where it will then stabilize at that state until someone else trades in cards. Meaning the game state is static, huge swing, static, huge swing, which isn't particularly interesting to watch. Finally, and this is really what Risk does best, which is, of course, gathering dust in your closet where it belongs. So what should you play instead of Risk? I recommend Small World. I don't actually, but this is the panel, what the panel told me to do. So how Small World works is you are playing a fantasy race in a small world. You can be things like flying skeletons, hill giants, ghost elves. There are a lot of options, but they're always randomized. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your dudes, you're going to put them on the map, you're going to take countries, maybe fight a little bit. But unlike Risk, where you replenish troops over time, that doesn't happen in Small World. So slowly your civilization will crumble as you can't actually maintain enough guys to control territory. At which point, you will abandon that race, create a new one, and jump on the map and swing it again. So, like Risk, you get points through controlling territory, but unlike Risk, the game state is constantly changing because people are always switching into new races to play to allow them to better establish themselves on the game board. It also has variable player powers. I was going over, flying skeletons, hill giants, they all do something different, which means no game of Small World is the same, unlike Risk, where really all you're trying to do is control Australia. In Small World, there is no Australia. There's, oh, I'm hill giants, I should go for the hills. Oh no, I'm flying skeletons now, I guess I shouldn't be doing that. So you have to keep changing your strategy as the game goes to remain viable. On the bright side, while it's named after the Disneyland ride, you do not have to listen to the song from the Disneyland ride while playing it. I instead, of course, recommend listening to Battle for Evermore by Led Zeppelin on a loop. That is very thematically relevant. What is another good alternative to play instead of Risk? That would, of course, be actually fighting in real wars. This is for 2 to 7 billion plus players. You can get the whole world involved if you want. It lasts just as long as whatever issue you have with the opponent does, or until all the emus are finally dead, which, as we all know, is never going to happen. But, it can also take less time than 6 days, especially if you, forget to wear a helmet. So unlike Risk, this game is entirely skill-based. There's no dice involved. If your gun jams, it's because you didn't clean it, and you should probably work on that. Again, unlike Risk, which is very single-player, like there's no teamwork involved, when you fight in a real war, there's a lot of teamwork involved. You have to work together, maybe form a coalition of the willing. Don't forget about Poland, because if you do, you'll lose the 2004 election. And unlike the wars in Risk, most actual real wars are real. Sorry, War on Poverty. Finally, it has a built-in table flip mechanic in case things just are not going your way at all. So what's the next game we should make fun of? It's Cards Against Humanity, which everybody thinks is good and everybody is wrong. It advertises itself as for 4 to 30 players, but have you ever played Cards Against Humanity with 30 players? No, what's the most you played it with? 6? Yeah, it's kind of the upper limit of what you want. I played it with 15. That took like 10 minutes around. It was really sad. So it advertises itself lying. It says it takes 30 minutes, but really it just takes until everyone wants to go home, because once Cards Against Humanity hits the table, no one's really going to be energetic enough to suggest a new game. Its Board Game Geek ranking is 2,521, which is too high. But when you think about it, most of the games under it are probably just Cards Against Humanity clones. And its core mechanics include reading, i.e. the cards, hand management, i.e. having 10 offensive cards in your hand and deciding which one's the most offensive at any given time, and deduction, primarily trying to figure out who played what. That way you don't give it to them because you don't want them to win, because you're a jerk. So what should you play instead of Cards Against Humanity? Now this one is a stretch, but I don't care. It's Mysterium. So, hi. Yeah, I'm entertaining the staff, and I'm doing a really bad job.
Liar.
Wow, you have low standards. Okay, so I recommend Mysterium. I know this is a little bit of a stretch because most people play Cards Against Humanity to just say all of the racist and sexist stuff they think, but don't want to say in polite conversation. Though they can do that now, given Trump's president. So Mysterium, though, is otherwise kind of similar. It's a game for 2 to 7 players, takes about 45 minutes. How this game works is you have one player who is a ghost, and they have a wicked case of ghost amnesia, so they don't really remember who killed them, but they're haunting this really cool mansion, so that's neat. Everyone else is playing paranormal investigators who are coming in to try to help the ghost rest in peace by solving the murder case. But being a ghost and having wicked amnesia, you don't really remember who killed you. So what's going to happen is each investigator has a specific suspect, location, and item that the ghost is trying to lean them towards from a set. And I should have put like an image of the game board in here. But the ghost who's trying to indicate these things to the player can't tell them because they're a ghost. So they can only communicate through the player with dreams. So if you're trying to indicate to the player that maybe the gardener killed you, you have to give them a card that has maybe plant art. Be like, hey, this is the gardener. And then all the players will sit around and try to like look at it and be like, well, that snowman's pretty sexy, so maybe it's the painter. And there's a lot of, huh? Yeah. So in the sense of Cards Against Humanity, where there's a lot of creativity trying to link things together and like trying to analyze stuff, they're very similar. But where Mysterium becomes better is that it's actually a game with real mechanics and doesn't offend and can be played with the whole family. At least can be played with the whole family without blushing. But yeah, otherwise it's everybody's working together, try to figure out what the dream cards do so they can collectively solve the murder mystery. And it's so much fun. I love it. But if the whole like deduction part and creative part isn't why you're playing Cards Against Humanity, and really all you want to do is offend people, you can always take up cyberbullying children. Cyberbullying children requires 2 or more players. You just do it till you're bored. If they start crying and quit, you can just find a new child. Its board game geek ranking is totally elite, yo. For core mechanics, you have creativity. Honestly, to be a cyberbully, you don't have to be particularly creative. But if you want to be a good cyberbully, you really have to kick it up a notch. Work on your insults. Like Cards Against Humanity, there's also hand management. But instead of having 10 cards trying to figure out which ones to play, you just have to figure out how to type. That's hand management, right? And finally, there's deduction, trying to figure out how to best offend this child. So that's cyberbullying. It's great fun for you and 4chan. So the next game that isn't particularly good is Betrayal at House on the Hill. It's a controversial pick because people like it for some reason. So Betrayal at House on the Hill is for 3 to 6 players. It says it takes an hour, but if you've ever played a game of Betrayal at House on the Hill that took an hour, you're lying. Its board game geek ranking is 431, and its core mechanics are cooperation. You have to work together to explore a haunted house until someone eventually betrays all of you, and then you have to work together to kill them. Die rolling, you roll a lot of dice. Dice dictate everything.
I played one that took less than an hour, but we all died.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works. If the haunt triggers like immediately, you can all die, but otherwise. So the die rolling isn't that bad in the game because there's a lot of control, because instead of varying from 1 to 6 with normal dice, it's 0 to 2. So while there's still variation, it's not huge, but still a lot of the game is luck dependent because of that. And finally, there's player elimination. While you generally don't get eliminated till mid-game, in fact, it's impossible to get eliminated early game, it's still very possible for, if the game ends up dragging towards the end, for you to get eliminated when there's still an hour of play left, which isn't particularly fair. So what's my main beef with Betrayal? Because I haven't really complained about it a lot. And the first beef, of course, is that there are no rules. Betrayal has a fat rule book. It explains a lot, and then it doesn't really matter because every time you play, you're going to have an instance where you're going to have to check the rule book and then go, I don't actually know how to resolve this situation. Because there's so much variability in haunts, they cause so much confusion for players. So you could have 2 games that are going identical until one player's like, I don't know how we should interpret this, and then everything goes wildly out of whack. It suffers from quarterbacking. Quarterbacking in board games is where one player kind of dictates what the group does. So this isn't an issue where you have a group of players who all have equal experience and are equally vocal in a game, but that's very rare. So what'll happen frequently in Betrayal is you have one person telling everyone else what to do, and then they don't really have autonomy in how they're playing anymore, and they're just doing what they're told, so they can eventually win and play a better game. And finally, there's torture. This game is mean. It doesn't like you. It does not hide that. The good thing about Betrayal is it's actually, like, the theme is really solid. If you do want to just pretend that you're in a haunted house, Betrayal is a great way to do that. But mechanically, it's just really lacking. So what would be a good thematic game that is not mechanically lacking? That would probably be Dead of Winter. Dead of Winter is a game for 2 to 5 players. It takes 1 to 2 hours. That's a lie. It takes 3 hours. Its board game geek ranking is 67, and its core mechanics are cooperation. Like Betrayal at House on the Hill, you have to work together until in Betrayal you have a haunt and a traitor is revealed. In Dead of Winter, there may or may not be a traitor throughout the whole game, and you don't know that. So you will cooperate, but you will still be inherently untrusting of the other players because the person who's telling you what to do and trying to take control of the game may very well be trying to cause you all to lose. Or they might not be, and there might not be anybody doing that, and you are all paranoid for nothing. It's great. It really keeps the game running in such a way that nobody trusts each other fully, which prevents too much quarterbacking. It also has an action point system. How action points work is, in this game, is you roll dice. The dice have numbers, and numbers let you do specific things. So each die is a point. You can use each die to do something based on the number you rolled. I know you're going to say, oh, well, that's die rolling. It's like, it's fine in this game because you can pick characters that are min-maxed to allow you to do useful actions with any roll. And even if you roll something terrible, you can still use it for other things, which the game explicitly allows. There's also player movement, which is a mechanic. You move your player around to different places, and they may or may not die in the process because every time you go somewhere, you have a 1 in 12 chance of just straight up dying. I didn't explain that. I put this slide in 6 hours ago. Dead of Winter. You're surviving the zombie apocalypse in the middle of winter. You are a group of survivors with another group of survivors with another group of survivors, and you are just trying to gather supplies to survive the zombie apocalypse. And one of you may or may not be trying to kill everyone. You never know. The game has 10 built-in scenarios that you can do, so you can play different games each time, whether it be hunting zombies down, trying to survive for a prolonged period of time, or building a wall. I'm not even kidding with that one. You can just straight up build a wall. And there are different mechanics based on if you want to play with traders or without traders, or if you're playing with lower player counts or higher player counts. So the game really actively balances itself for your play style. But if you're just really committed to the haunted house theme of betrayal and surviving a zombie apocalypse in the middle of winter isn't doing it for you, even if you can play as a dog or mall Santa, I guess you could just get murdered in a haunted house. That's a lot of fun. There's a trader mechanic, i.e. your friend who is actually going to murder you. There's player movement. You move around the house until you eventually fall through the floorboards and can't move anymore, which is a lot of fun. I love not being able to move. And there's torture, i.e. what they do to you when they catch you. So, I don't know, don't get murdered in a haunted house. It's not fun. What's the next game we got? We got Munchkin. Munchkin is a game for 3 to 6 players. It advertises itself as 3 to 6 players. If you want to play with 8 people, have 2 different games of Munchkin going. What is wrong with you? Because if you play with 8 people, that 1 to 2 hour time frame, that's not happening. It's going to be like 5. Just because you can combine sets to allow more players doesn't mean you should. As I was talking about, the playtime of this game exponentially increases as you add more people. If you're playing with 3 people, the game's going to be really quick. If you're playing with 6, it is not. The playtime also varies heavily based on how you interpret the rules, primarily whether or not you can actually finish an action in 2.65 seconds, which is what it tells you you have, but no one does that because everyone just spends 5 minutes deliberating instead. Its board game geek ranking is 3,479, which sounds high until you realize that everything between this and Monopoly is just clones of this and Monopoly. Because Monopoly has like 2,000 variants, and Munchkin has several hundred. In case you've ever been to a comic book store, you would know that. All of the variants are a little different, which I guess is nice, unlike Monopoly, where all they do is change the little silver things.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Was the last game about getting murdered in a haunted house?
Yes.
I'm not finding it. I was going to look that up.
No. He's actually reading. You think
Oh,
get
okay.
murdered in a haunted house.
I got the title for a game, and I'm sorry I'm having to. I'm having to be area head and talk to volunteers at the same time as trying to pay attention.
I'm gonna make that now.
You should.
I've got like 7 game prototypes. I'm gonna add that to the list.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool to have multiple ways to kill your friend.
Should it be an immersive experience, like an escape room, or?
What could be both?
The bigger problem is it takes 2 to 6 months to implant somebody in the friend group for them to actually be scary enough when they all come to the house.
No, you pay someone off.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That works too.
Like you just go, hey Joe, I'll pay you $100,000 to kill Kenny. Yeah, let's do it. He's not my friend anyway. But yeah, no, it's not a real game.
Okay.
Neither was living in crippling poverty. Neither was actually fighting in real wars.
But that one actually, I was imagining one of the things I think that makes Patrol fun is the random factor. But you're right, the mechanics are really clunky.
Yeah.
But if I had like 20 different, that's a low number, but still 20 different reasons of why I'm trying to kill you and how to kill you, and you had the same thing, and we're trying to outmaneuver each other like chess.
That's Dead of Winter, though.
But that's, I mean, Dead of Winter, but you know that there's only 2 players and you are traders.
Yeah.
It removes things.
Oh, no. There's a specific Dead of Winter variant you can play where you're both traders.
Okay.
It's set up so that each person has a trader victory. So you both win together if you actually survive the scenario. But at any point, you could betray to end the game if you think you can actually fulfill your trader goal.
Huh.
It's hilarious.
It's
So awful.
Okay.
Dead of Winter has so many ways to play it, and
Well, there's Mr. Lucky, which is a thing you wouldn't think is a game either. So I've heard some really weird titles.
there's Lupin Louie.
Lupin Louie, which now they have Lupin Chewie, the Star Wars president.
Of course they did. I mean, they of course that.
You're talking Millennium Falcon taking out stormtroopers.
I never watched Star Wars.
I will not judge.
I'm a really good nerd. Okay. So I don't care. I've been going really quick, so I'm actually like 5 minutes ahead of where I should be. Even after that interruption, I dry ran this and I got 50, and I was really proud of myself. But I talk fast. Also, the people I do panels with talk a lot slower than I do, so I've had to add content to all of these. Okay, so circling back, Munchkin sucks. We all know it. Its core mechanics are hand management. You have a hand of 5 cards that let you do things, generally mess with each other, and you just don't use them, and you sit on them for the entire game until someone tries to win, and then you mess with them. So really, hand management is you have a hand of 5 cards, and you never change it throughout the game. The next mechanic is Take That. Take That is a fun mechanic in games. It's where you effectively mess with other players. In Munchkin, it's where you power up a monster by 5, so suddenly the player is losing to it instead of winning. But it's a really common mechanic in games. When done well, it's great. In Munchkin, it's okay. They don't do a poor job, but people aren't really good at it. The final core mechanic is variable player powers. I actually think Munchkin does a fine job with this, where as the game progresses, you gain abilities that let you do things, and they're not always broken, so it's fine. That's like the one issue I don't have with Munchkin is the class and like power system is fine. Otherwise, it's terrible.
What's your favorite version of Munchkin, since there's a billion of those?
I mean, none of them.
Okay.
Objectively, none. But my first version was Cthulhu, and I liked how cultists worked back when I didn't know anything about board games. And I played Quest a lot for a while because that was weird. But no, it's bad. So basically, when it comes down to it, who plays Munchkin? Munchkin is for people who are not smart enough to play Dungeons and Dragons. So this is a game for, I can't use the line. Huh? Yeah? Wow? Sick burn? I have a better line, but we have children in the room.
We don't have time to play.
No. If you're playing a game of Munchkin, you have time to play Dungeons and Dragons. This takes forever.
I mean, I like, well, yeah, I mean time as in let's meet every week because I like to have my character advance so to get into the story. But,
Oh, just don't care about that.
right, exactly.
That's what just playing board games and play Betrayal if you're not going to be regular. Okay, so really when it comes down to it, what is Munchkin? Munchkin is a pitched battle to see who can reach level 10 third. Because the first 2 people who try to hit level 10 will fail at it. And then by the time the third person goes around, everybody has expended all of their Take That cards, stopping the first 2 players. So I wouldn't say that this game punishes the leader as much as it's not balanced from the get-go. Core mechanics are cheating. Munchkin explicitly encourages you to treat, wherein in the rules, if you are playing with people who don't know how to play Munchkin, it encourages you to lie about the rules. No game should do that. If you've ever played a game with people who lie about the rules, you know it's a miserable experience. So when you're playing it in a game where people are explicitly encouraged to lie about the rules and it is allowed, it's even worse. Another mechanic is telling time. Officially, according to Munchkin rules, you have 2.65 seconds to stop someone from winning the game or a battle. But let's be honest, that never happens. It's a 5-minute deliberation between all players who aren't that one deciding whether or not to let them win. And a really fun game of chicken, to be honest. Finally, shuffling 600 cards. It's a lot of fun. I love shuffling a lot of cards. I know you do too. That's what I do when I'm bored. I just buy 10 packs of bicycle cards and just try to make a deck out of them. It's not good. So what do I recommend playing instead? I recommend Love Letter. Love Letter is a game for 2 to 4 players, which is how many you should be playing Munchkin with, and takes about 20 minutes, which is how long Munchkin should take. So the goal of Love Letter is to get with the princess, though as we can all agree, she has a pretty bad case of RBF, so I'd rather get with the countess. How Love Letter works is you have a card in your hand, you draw a card from a deck, and then you play one of those 2 cards to try to remove another player from the game. Now, I know I went over how player elimination is generally a bad mechanic, but Love Letter does it pretty well, primarily because if a round lasts more than 2 minutes, you're not playing the game right. So by the time between the time you're eliminated and the next round starts, you don't even have time to swipe someone on Tinder. That's how quick this game is. But basically, you just run through a deck of 15 cards, playing them at a time, and you keep going until one person's left. Or if you go through the whole deck, which is rare, whichever one of the players has the most powerful card in their hand at the end of the game wins. Other good things about Love Letter are, because it's so short and casual, you can just jump in and out of it. So it's a great game to play if you're, say, waiting on that 5th friend who's always late, or for the pizza to show up. Let's see, what else do I have to say? Another great thing about Love Letter, of course, is it reinforces the patriarchy. After that close call in 2016, it's really good to know that men are still in charge. And there are not enough people laugh at that joke. The downside, of course, being that it didn't include an actual love letter, just wooden cubes. When I got this game, I was kind of at a low point in my life, and I needed some real solid positive affirmation, and instead I just got some wooden cubes. So I decided to start playing the next game instead, which is, of course, competitive bleach drinking. Bleach drinking, huh?
I got the humor now.
Okay. You should Google it. Google it. Competitive bleach drinking is for 1 or more players. It takes 10 to 20 minutes. It really depends on your toxin resistance. Its Board Game Geek ranking is 366 episodes, and its core mechanics are pick up and deliver, primarily picking up the bottle of bleach and delivering it into your mouth, pressing your luck, seeing how much bleach you drink before you're hospitalized, and in extreme cases, player elimination. Now, I'd like to tell you, of course, do not drink bleach. It's bad for you. That being said, bleach is delicious and nutritious. Bleach is mostly water. We are mostly water. Therefore, we are bleach. That is a lie. Do not believe me. However, bleach does taste better than PBR, so it's got that going for it. And unlike many of the games I've talked about previously, with bleach you only suffer for an appropriate amount of time. And if that time isn't until your stomach is pumped and it goes a little longer than that, it allows you to play a game against the highest stakes possible, against Death himself. And if you are playing a game against Death for your life, I strongly discourage challenging him to a round of Limbo, because he's bound to win unless you have a hamster handy. So now that I've gone over a lot of board games, I'm going to do a quiz to see what you have learned. So, is this a board game? Raise your hand if yes, and keep it down if no.
I'm going to say yes.
Good job. Chess is a board game. Chess is great. Not all old games are bad. Chess has stood the test of time. Even if it's kind of solved, it's not solved.
No, but don't let Steve Jackson see it, because he'll turn it into a board game.
He will. No, it's not. This is Candyland. And as we've all established, as I think we've established, any game that doesn't give you any autonomy over what you do is not a game, it's a lie. And Candyland is the epitome of that. Is this a board game? I'm honestly not sure either. It's the Campaign for North Africa. Huh? Yeah. This is a lifestyle. A game of the Campaign for North Africa can take, 10,000 hours. The rule book is thicker than House of Leaves, and it's just suffering. That is a small child. This map is larger than a small child. In this game, You have to prioritize pasta water if you're the Italians as an actual resource. Next, is this a game? Of course it is. We just went over this. It's a delicious, delicious game. Finally, and since none of you are on my previous panel, this is going to go over everyone's head. Is this a game? It is, of course, a game. It is the Jackie Chan Adventures board game, which is the epitome of art. The Jackie Chan Adventure, Yes, I own it. The Jackie Chan Adventures board game is for 2 or more players, while it only comes with supplies for 4 players. The fact that it says 2 or more to me implies that you could play it with as many people as you want, which is, of course, what I have done. It doesn't really matter how long it lasts because it's going to be the best time of your life. Yes, you collect the talismans. In this game, you play one of several versions of Jackie Chan as you collect the talismans and challenge the Dark Hand to combat. Your various moves include things like the Uncle Bug Crusher, Jade Butt Wop Blast, and the Flying Fish Bobs. You will win. You will have the best time of your life. It is truly the pinnacle of artistic achievement, and no game is better, even Scythe. And with that, that's the panel. This slide is not updated because it mentions about how I hate Cards Against Humanity but didn't have time to talk about it. Snakes and Ladders is a game, which is also a lie. I don't really remember where I was going with this. But you can follow me on Twitter, at 5thGen, not PKMN. Because my previous channel is 5th Gen Isn't Pokemon. Let you know when I go to IHOP, because IHOP is the holiest of all restaurants. But in general, just not just tonight if I go. I didn't edit this page before I did it. I don't remember what it said. This panel will be uploaded onto YouTube along with every other panel I've done. So if you want to go onto YouTube at 5th Gen Is Not Pokemon, you can see all of the panels I've given with more people, so they're more fun because we just riff on each other instead of me